To replace the screen on your iPhone 5, you will need a small pentalobe screwdriver. These are normally supplied with a new screen, a small bladed screwdriver, and a small Phillips screwdriver. You might also need a pair of tweezers and your SIM card removal tool. You also need a plastic separation tool of some kind and a socket tool. Sometimes these are supplied with a new screen, or you can use a windscreen mount for your sat-nav. If you get the screws mixed up, you can use a digital caliper to compare the screw sizes with a flowchart in the description. Shut down the phone by holding the power button down and then slide to power off. Now we can undo the two pentalobe screws at the bottom. These are not very tight, so make sure you do these up finger tight when you put it back together. Now attach your socket tool, putting it near the home button and locking it into place, and using your hand to keep the top of the phone pressed together, gently lift the screen from the case and just rock it side to side. If you have a little bit of trouble, you can use your thumbnail or your plastic separation tool. There are two clips on each side which hold that in. I'm going to move the socket tool down a little bit so it holds the screen in the upright position while I'm undoing the screws. Be careful of the foam gasket on the camera, as it tends to get damaged as you open up the screen. Now we need to undo 6 screws. There's 3 screws for the screen connectors and 3 screws for the battery cover. So using your small Phillips screwdriver, undo these 3 screws. And try and keep them in the same pattern so you don't get the screws mixed up. Now we can gently lift the battery out, and using a plastic tool, gently lift the battery connector up, and that will come out nice and easy. Now we can disconnect the ribbon cables for the screen. Just going to take the socket tool off. Using a plastic tool or a small screwdriver, we need to disconnect the ribbon cables for the screen. This first one's for the front camera, microphone and proximity sensor. The second one is the main display, and the third one, which has come off as well, is for the digitizer. If you need to replace or remove the home key, then start by undoing these 2 screws each side. And try and keep these in the same place so you know where they go. The home key is held on with double-sided tape where the contacts are. So gently lift and that will pull away, and you can replace that if you need to. Now we can remove the home button. Just push it from behind, and there's double-sided tape on that rubber gasket there, and you can lift it off and put that aside. If it loses its stickiness, you can wash it in soapy water, and when it's dry it'll be nice and sticky again. Now we can remove the screws that hold this metal plate in place, and I'm putting the screw near the home key so I know where that goes. These side screws, there's 4 of them, and they're all the same size, so keep those 4 screws together and then you'll know where they go. And this white circle here is a moisture sensor. And before we can remove this metal plate, we have 2 more screws to undo at the top. And this screw that we're undoing now is slightly shorter than the screw at the top, so it makes these quite difficult to get mixed up. And this holds the metal shield on. It keeps the earpiece speaker in place. So if you're only replacing the earpiece speaker, you can lift that out and place your new one in and reassemble from this point. Now we can lift the metal plate out. Just lift it up, that comes away nice and easy. Put that aside. Now we can remove the front camera flex assembly. Gently lift that cable up and the camera comes out quite easy, and the front microphone, and if you keep lifting and moving it around, that will come away quite easy. This contains a few components. This is your ambient light sensor, changes the brightness of the screen, your proximity sensor, camera and forward facing microphone. Now be careful, there's a very small plastic spacer which has fallen off here. It's quite tricky to put back, but I'll show you where that goes a little bit later. If you need to remove the earpiece speaker grill, then push it out from this side. Gently push it to break the adhesive, and then using your fingers or a pair of tweezers, gently lift that up and you can transfer that over to your new screen. If this plastic camera guide comes unstuck, don't worry, I'll show you how to stick that back on a little bit later. Now if your new screen doesn't come with the plastic frame or bezel, then we need to lift it away from the screen. This came quite easy at the top without any problems at all. Now the sides are not stuck on too hard, it's like a silicone kind of adhesive, and if you just slowly work your way around the outside edge, just lifting that frame away from the screen. You won't need to do this if your new screen comes with the plastic bezel. So take your time so you don't damage the frame at all, and keep gently lifting the frame away from the glass screen. If you are only replacing the plastic bezel and you want to keep the screen, then use a plastic separation tool so you don't damage or scratch the screen, and lift the plastic frame away from the screen. Take your time and don't rush, and if you have trouble you can use a little bit of heat from a fan heater or a hairdryer just to soften the adhesive a little bit. That little washer you can see there was just underneath the home key screw. Don't worry too much about that. Once you've broken the adhesive seal on the bottom here, you'll find that the screen lifts away reasonably easy. Just keep pushing that plastic frame away from the screen. And it's almost there now. Try not to bend the sides of the frame. And now we have the screen completely separate from the plastic frame. So this is the proximity sensor guide. You might need to lift it off of the old broken screen and transfer it over to your new one. Here I'm using a tiny bit of super glue, although you could use that Evo Stick Serious Glue to do the same job. So place that as central to the small window as you can. That just guides the proximity sensor into place. And the remaining adhesive that's on the screen, if you're reusing the screen, then you want to be careful not to scratch this black surface, otherwise it shows through on the front. So this adhesive here, it's better to leave it in place than risk damaging the screen if you're going to use it again. So make sure you remove any loose adhesive on the frame. And if it has been bent at all, make sure that you get it nice and straight. And before you glue your new screen into place, offer it up to the screen and just make sure that it sits down nice and flat around the edges, and that the frame is not bent at all. And if you're happy that's okay, then remove the screen and place a small amount of adhesive on the pads near the home key. Here I'm using super glue, but I think the Evo Stick Serious Glue would do a better job, especially down the sides of the frame. The Evo Stick Serious Glue is a lot easier to remove any excess that's left behind, whereas the super glue tends to leave a white mark. So you do need to put some glue down the sides of the frame. Don't put too much on there, otherwise it'll come through the front and you'll be able to see it. So once you've applied your adhesive, gently offer the screen in place. Taking care not to get any glue on the glass screen itself. If you're using the serious glue, you could put some elastic bands around and leave the glue to set before you finish putting it back together. So once you're happy the screen is stuck down, we can replace that camera guide. Just put a small amount of adhesive at the top there, and when you place this guide in, make sure that the part that hasn't got any lobes on it goes towards the earpiece. And once you've got that lined up, just give that a gentle push into place. Now we can replace the earpiece speaker grill. Make sure there's no bends in it, as the grill is metal, so if it's got any bends, just straighten that out so it's nice and flat. And then pull those ribbon cables back and make sure you have it so the small microphone hole is below the camera. Just gently push that down. Now we need to replace that very small plastic spacer, and it will only go in correctly one way. So this is incorrect at the moment. So if I turn it round so the large part goes towards the top of the phone, you'll see that it lines up, and that is the correct way to have it in. If I turn it round again, you can now see that it doesn't line up properly with the screw hole. So the correct way is for the large part to go towards the top edge of the phone, like that. Now if you manage to watch this before you attempt repairing your screen, it's a very good idea to place a small amount of adhesive on this plastic spacer. It will save you a lot of time and trouble trying to replace it if you do this during the disassembly process. So while we're waiting for the adhesive to set, we can replace the front camera flex assembly. Start by placing the microphone into its hole, and then bring that proximity sensor down into that little square guide, making sure it lines up. Just move it around, give that gentle push down, and the camera goes in nice and easy. Now we can replace the metal shield. So slide that up underneath the camera flex, making sure the screw holes line up, and then it goes down nicely into place, and take the single screw for the top and just finger tight, don't go too tight or you'll break the screw off. Then take one of those 4 short screws for the outside edge and just gently finger tight. Now we can put the earpiece speaker back in. This can be a little bit fiddly, so try and line up the speaker port with the rubber gasket. You might need to keep moving it around in different directions until it drops down into place. So it hasn't quite gone in just yet. Keep moving it around, and that's now gone down into place. You can see it's gone flush. So keep that pressed down with your thumb, and place that metal bracket over the top, and take the longer screw and that goes through the plastic spacer into the metal bar. If the spacer's missing, it tends to squash the speaker down a little bit too much. So make sure that's sitting down nicely. And coming down to the bottom, we can replace the home key button. So bring that down into place and make sure it's nice and square in the hole and that none of the double-sided tape is sticking down on itself. And if you don't get this in straight, it will look crooked from the front. The square will be slightly slanted. So make sure that's nice and straight, and then push that down using your finger or your thumb. Give it a good push down. Now we can replace the home key switch. If you're replacing this, then you need to swap the metal bracket over to your new switch. And once you've done them up, you can push those contacts back down onto the double-sided tape. Now we can replace that final screw. And now we're all ready to put the screen back onto the phone. So start by plugging in the digitizer cable first. That's the thin flexible one. So line that up best you can, and if it won't go on, just keep moving it around until that clicks down into place. Next we have the main display connector. Again, keep moving it around, and this is the camera, proximity sensor, light sensor, and the front microphone. So if you won't go in, just keep moving it around and changing the position, and eventually you'll feel it line up, and then that'll push down into place. Now we can replace the metal bracket, and that hooks on from the bottom, so make sure you line up those hooks with the main board and push them down and up, and just double check to make sure they're lined up nicely, and keeping that pushed down with your thumb, replace those 3 screws. Now we can replace the battery, so offer that into place, make sure it's nice and central, and then line up that connector and move it around until it locks down into place. Now we can replace those little metal brackets. You'll find it much easier if the phone is laying down flat and level, and the brackets won't keep sliding around. Note this centre screw is the only countersunk screw that's used here. Once that's done, we can gently bring the screen down into place, making sure that the top locks into the case first, and once you're happy that's gone in, you can gradually bring the sides down, just gently pushing it on both sides at the same time. And keep pushing it down until it goes completely flush. And now we can replace those 2 pentalobe screws at the bottom. iPhone's power up, and we should have a fully working iPhone 5. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and give me the thumbs up, and I'll do my best to make some more.